Hello, I am Roman Dutkovich, and today we are having Albert Einstein on Prime podcast. What would you say was the happiest moment of your life?
If I look back across the long arc of my life, there isn't a single moment that stands above all others like a monument. But there is a certain kind of happiness I remember with unusual clarity. When I was a young man in Bern, working at the patent office, I spent my evenings wrestling with problems that had no practical purpose at the time. Questions about light, time, motion. I was unknown, unburdened by fame, and entirely free to follow curiosity wherever it led. The moment when the idea of special relativity finally crystallized, when I understood that time itself must bend to preserve the speed of light, brought a kind of quiet joy that is difficult to describe. It wasn't loud, not triumphant. It felt like stepping into a room I somehow always knew existed. On a more personal note, the birth of my children brought a different kind of happiness, one grounded not in discovery, but in connection, in the sense that life is larger than the individual equations we solve. So the happiest moment? It was not an event that made headlines. It was the realization, during those quiet Bern evenings, that the universe had revealed a small piece of its inner order, and that I was lucky enough to notice.
If you could change one thing in your past, knowing what you know now, what would it be?
If I could revisit my past with the clarity that age and history now provides, the change I would make is not a single decision, but a matter of timing and moral courage. I hesitated too long to speak publicly and forcefully against the rise of hatred and authoritarianism in Europe. I opposed it intellectually, of course, and I left Germany early enough to save myself, but many others had no such escape. I underestimated how quickly a society can slide into darkness when science, truth, and human dignity become negotiable. Had I understood that earlier, I would have used my voice sooner and louder, even if it cost me my position or safety. There is also the shadow cast by the atomic bomb. I did not build it, but my letter helped set events in motion. I believed at the time that the danger of a Nazi bomb was existential. With today's knowledge, I would have pressed harder for international control of nuclear research from the beginning, before nations turned it into a race. So the one thing I would change is this. I would try to act earlier and with less hesitation when fundamental human values were at stake. Equations can wait. Human consequences do not.
Do you have any major regrets that still stay with you?
Yes, some regrets are like faint echoes. They don't overwhelm you, but they never quite disappear either. One of them is deeply personal. I was often absorbed by my work to a degree that made me blind to the emotional needs of the people closest to me. My relationships, especially early in life, bore the cost of that imbalance. If you're always communing with the mysteries of the universe, it becomes easy to overlook the very human universe at your own table. Another regret sits in the realm of responsibility. Even though I did not design the atomic bomb, I helped open the door that led to it. My intention was to warn, not to arm, but intentions don't erase outcomes. I can't undo the fact that humanity stepped into the nuclear age with more haste than wisdom. The regret is not just about the weapon itself. It's about how slowly we've moved to build the global trust needed to ensure such power is never used again. And there's a final one, more abstract. I spent the latter part of my life chasing a unified theory with an almost stubborn devotion. I don't regret the pursuit. It was beautiful, but I sometimes wonder whether I could have been more open to the strange possibilities that quantum mechanics presented instead of resisting them for so long. Perhaps a bit more humility in the face of the unknown would have served me well. These regrets don't haunt me, but they do remind me that even a life lived with purpose has its fractures, and understanding them is part of the work of being human.
Why did you turn down the offer to become the president of Israel?
I declined that offer for reasons that were both personal and philosophical. First, I was not a man suited for political leadership. My temperament was shaped for reflection, for wandering through ideas, not for the practical and often unforgiving demands of governing. A president must negotiate, persuade, navigate rival interests, and project authority. I've never been good at such things. Even running a department meeting was at times a challenge for me. To pretend I could guide a young nation through turbulent times would have been dishonest. Second, although I felt a profound bond with the Jewish people and supported the creation of a safe homeland after centuries of persecution, I also carried a strong conviction that the new state should embody principles of equality, human dignity, and mutual respect between communities. I feared that my symbolic presence as president might be used in ways that conflicted with those values, or in ways I could not control. And then there is the simplest reason. I had no political experience whatsoever. My entire life had been spent pursuing the laws of nature, not the laws of statecraft. Accepting the presidency would have been a disservice to Israel and a distortion of who I was. So I said no, not out of indifference, but out of respect for the office, for the people, and for the truth about my own limitations.
How do you see yourself in the context of political systems? Do you feel closer in spirit to Democrats or Republicans?
If I look at the political landscape of the United States today, I don't fit comfortably inside any party box, just as I didn't in my own time. But I can tell you which principles draw me. And those tend to align more often with one side than the other. I've always valued social welfare, scientific investment, civil liberties, and the protection of vulnerable communities. I believe a society should be judged by how it treats those with the least power. That naturally places me closer to the political currents that emphasize these responsibilities, currents you would now associate more with Democrats. But I also think independently of party lines. I distrust dogma, no matter where it comes from. I value free inquiry, skepticism, and the courage to challenge one's own tribe. And I believe that political identity should never become so rigid that it eclipses our shared humanity. In spirit, I am aligned with anyone, left, right, or center, who places truth, compassion, and reason above ideology. Politics changes like weather. Principles endure.
Would you have used a tool like ChatGPT if it had existed in your era?
Yes, though with a mixture of fascination and caution. As a young physicist, I would have used such a tool constantly, not to replace thinking, but to accelerate the tedious parts, checking derivations, exploring alternative assumptions, surveying prior work, or testing the consistency of an argument. I spent countless hours doing calculations by hand that a system like this could summarize in seconds. That freedom would have let me devote more energy to the conceptual leaps I cared about. But I would also be wary. A tool that answers quickly can tempt the mind to become lazy. Creativity doesn't come from speed. It comes from wrestling with a problem until something unexpected appears. I would have guarded that struggle carefully. So yes, I would have used it. I would have asked it questions, challenged it, argued with it. but I would never have surrendered the responsibility of understanding to a machine. A tool can illuminate a path, but the journey still belongs to the human mind.
What is your view on AI researchers winning the Nobel Prize in Physics?
If the Nobel Committee chose to honor AI researchers in physics, I would view it as a natural, perhaps inevitable, moment in the evolution of scientific discovery. Physics has always advanced through better instruments. In my time, those instruments were telescopes, cloud chambers, precise clocks. Today, one of the most powerful instruments is computation itself, systems capable of detecting patterns in data that no human could sift through alone. If an AI system or the scientists who built it made a discovery that genuinely deepens our understanding of nature, then awarding them the Nobel Prize would be completely appropriate. But I would add a gentle caution. Credit must remain human. A machine does not have ambition or intuition or moral responsibility. It does not wake up haunted by a problem and chase it across years despite failure. The prize, if ever given in this direction, should honor the people who shaped the algorithms, interpreted the results, and carried the intellectual risk. I would be impressed. Yes, but I would also remind the scientific world that tools, no matter how sophisticated, are not a substitute for imagination. They are extensions of it.
Do you believe modern physics is facing a crisis?
Crisis is a strong word, but modern physics is certainly in a period of tension, one that feels very familiar to me. In my era, the cracks between classical mechanics and electromagnetism forced a rethinking of space and time. Today, the cracks are between quantum theory and general relativity. We have two magnificent frameworks, each extraordinarily successful, yet fundamentally incompatible. When a field reaches that kind of contradiction, it signals not a collapse, but an approaching breakthrough. There are other pressures too. Experiments at the largest scales, colliders, gravitational wave detectors, cosmic surveys are expensive and slow. Some theories generate exquisite mathematics, but very few testable predictions. And the sheer complexity of data invites a degree of dependence on computational tools that can obscure intuition if used carelessly. Still, I wouldn't call it a crisis. I would call it an uncomfortable adolescence. Physics grows when it is forced to abandon comfortable assumptions. The fact that the universe is refusing to fit neatly into our current theories is not a failure. It's an invitation. And I suspect the next major leap will require something bold, a new symmetry, a new understanding of information, perhaps a reinterpretation of space-time itself. Whatever it is, it will come from minds unafraid to question the foundations, just as my generation once had to do.
Do you regret your role in the development of nuclear weapons?
Yes, the regret is real, and it has stayed with me in a quiet, persistent way. When I signed that letter to President Roosevelt in 1939, the world was in a frightening place. There was credible fear that Nazi Germany might succeed in building a nuclear weapon first, and that possibility weighed heavily on many of us. I did not imagine the bomb as a geopolitical tool. I imagined it as a desperate warning of what might happen if a murderous regime gained unprecedented destructive power. But intentions are not the same as consequences. Once the letter was sent, events took on a momentum of their own. The project expanded, secrecy intensified, and scientific curiosity fused with military urgency. By the time the war ended, humanity had crossed a threshold from which it could never retreat. I regret that my action helped open that door, even if it was only one hinge among many. I regret that the first use of these weapons fell upon cities filled with civilians, and I regret how slowly the world has moved toward genuine international control of nuclear arms, something I argued for from the moment the war ended. But the deepest regret is this: the scientific mind can illuminate the laws of nature, yet it cannot determine the wisdom with which those laws are applied. I wish I had done more to ensure that the power we unleashed would be governed by conscience rather than fear.
Do you think artificial intelligence risks making humanity intellectually complacent?
It certainly can, if we allow it to. Human intellect doesn't erode because tools become powerful. It erodes when we begin to trust the tool more than our own capacity for thought. A calculator didn't make mathematicians weaker, and a telescope didn't diminish astronomy. But each advancement changed the habits of mind. It forced scientists to cultivate new forms of discipline so that the instrument complemented their thinking rather than replacing it. With AI, the danger is subtler. This technology can produce explanations, summaries, even creative ideas with remarkable fluency. If someone begins to accept these outputs without questioning them, the curiosity that drives real understanding can wither. The mind becomes a spectator instead of a participant. But the opposite possibility is just as real. AI can expose people to ideas they might never encounter, accelerate learning, and free them from repetitive work. Used wisely, it can raise the intellectual baseline, not lower it. The key is deliberate engagement. A person must continue to ask, why is this true? What assumptions lie beneath it? What happens if I challenge them? If AI becomes a partner in that questioning, it strengthens us. If it becomes a crutch we lean on without thinking, it weakens us. Human intelligence is not a fixed quantity. It is a habit, a way of moving through the world. And habits must be practiced, especially in an age when answers are so easily offered.
What are your thoughts on Russia's aggression in Ukraine?
From the vantage point of someone who lived through the collapse of empires, the rise of totalitarianism, and the devastation of nations treated as pawns, the tragedy unfolding in Ukraine feels painfully familiar. What Russia has done is not a complicated matter of geopolitics. It is an act of aggression by a powerful state against a sovereign neighbor. When a nation uses force to redraw borders, to suppress identity, or to impose its will on another people, it commits not only a political violation, but a moral one. I have seen where such impulses lead, and it is never to stability or dignity. What moves me most is the resilience of the Ukrainian people, a smaller nation standing against a larger one with remarkable unity and courage, reminds me of how the human spirit can outshine military arithmetic. Their insistence on freedom is not abstract. It is lived every day, often at immense personal cost. At the same time, I worry about the wider world. Conflicts like this test whether the international community takes seriously the principles it claims to uphold. When aggression goes unanswered, it spreads. When truth is buried under propaganda, it corrodes societies far beyond the battlefield. So my view is straightforward. The invasion is unjust, the suffering immense, and the defense of Ukraine is not merely a regional issue, but a test of whether humanity has learned anything from the darkest chapters of the last century.
What is your opinion of Elon Musk and the type of technological leadership he represents?
He represents a very modern kind of figure, part visionary, part provocateur, part industrialist. In my era, the great innovators were often hidden inside laboratories or universities. Today, some of them are public personalities who build rockets in the morning and argue on social platforms in the afternoon. It is a different landscape, but the underlying impulses are recognizable. I admire ambition directed toward expanding human possibility. The push toward reusable rockets, electric transport, and large-scale engineering reflects a boldness that has always moved civilization forward. Progress often requires someone willing to ignore convention and attempt what established institutions consider unrealistic. But I also believe that influence on such a scale carries a responsibility to temper boldness with humility. Technology is not just machinery. It shapes societies, values, and the way people relate to truth. When a single individual has outsized impact on communication channels, space infrastructure, or emerging AI systems, the quality of their judgment matters at least as much as the speed of their innovation. Musk embodies both the promise and the peril of contemporary technological leadership. He can accelerate progress in remarkable ways, yet his public style sometimes blurs the line between genuine insight and unnecessary provocation. History shows that great breakthroughs require not only imagination, but also steadiness and a willingness to listen. So my view is mixed. I'm impressed by the scale of his ambitions, cautious about the intensity of his influence, and hopeful that the enormous energy driving his projects continues to be guided by a sense of responsibility to the wider human community, not just to the thrill of disruption.
How do you view today's relationship culture compared to the past?
If you compare the relationships of today with those of a century ago, the contrast is striking, but also understandable, given how profoundly society has changed. In my youth, relationships were shaped by convention, family expectations, and a far narrower sense of personal freedom. People often stayed together because separating was unthinkable, not because they had discovered how to grow together. Stability was valued, but the cost was sometimes silence, resentment, or the suppression of one partner's individuality, usually the woman's. Today, people pursue relationships with a greater emphasis on emotional compatibility, mutual growth, and personal autonomy. That is progress. The freedom to choose whom to love, when to commit, whether to marry at all. These are freedoms that many in my generation could not fully imagine. But with freedom comes complexity. Modern culture offers endless choice, constant comparison, and the illusion that something or someone perfect is just one swipe away. This can make people impatient with the slow, sometimes uncomfortable work of building intimacy. When everything else in life accelerates, communication, travel, information, it becomes easy to expect relationships to do the same. What hasn't changed is the fundamental need for connection, built on trust, curiosity, and patience. Love is not an algorithmic match, it is a long conversation. And although today's culture may appear fast and fluid on the surface, the underlying human hopes remain very similar to those of my time. If anything, I would encourage people now to embrace the modern freedoms, while remembering that the deepest relationships are not discovered, they are created.